This moment is a collage of your past. The steps that brought you here, of the things that shaped you. It's a story comprised of what you choose to remember. And so I ask, which memories get your attention? Where do you choose to shine that potentially life-changing spotlight? What are you looking back on? Do you remember those times you felt lost? Those times life was turned upside down, when you went into panic mode, when your perfectly mapped out reality was shaken at its foundation. Yet you got up and found steady ground, didn't you? Do you remember that? Do you remember when the things you thought were forever turned out to be as fleeting as a setting sun? When you realized a life well lived would mean figuring out the vast majority of it on your own, relying on your courage and your strength. Yet you pushed into the dark of night and lit a path, didn't you? Do you remember that? Do you remember the hard hits? The blatant losses, the gut-punching defeats, when you looked in the mirror and thought, this reflection, it's just not who it needs to be. This burden is too much to carry. Yet you got yourself together, you found faith in your reflection. And you not only carried that burden, but you made something of it, didn't you? Do you remember that? What do you choose to remember? And I'm not talking imagine or create or bring to life. No, which truths are you letting in? How quickly we forget who we are, how fleeting the recollection of our strength. See, if you take a single step back and examine, you'll see a breathtaking sample size of the demons already defeated. The mountains already climbed, the dragons already slayed, and you stand here now, afraid and unsure, as if you haven't already fought through the depths of hell, as if you haven't already proven to yourself that you've been there, as if this moment is new to you. You have what you need. And that's not the law of attraction or conjecture or hopeful thinking. It's remembering what you know in your soul to be true. You are made for this road laid out before you. You have to see it before they do. You have to believe it before they will. You have to be the architect of your plans and your goals, because no one will build them for you. And that's just it. In a world where victimhood is becoming currency and blame is becoming the norm, we have a choice. Create a temporary, fleeting escape, or create a life that matters. You know how much easier it is to project out at the world? To never have to look in the mirror and address the things you could be doing better? You know how much easier it is to hate him or her or them over there? To make up stories and scenarios about how much different life would be if it wasn't for A, B, and C holding you back? I mean, short term, it's like winning the lottery, right? You don't have to take any accountability. You don't have to have tough conversations with yourself. You don't have to reflect on the painful memories or decisions. No, you can put your feet up, sit back, point at the world, and say, look what they made me do. If only. But here's what's not being said. Every time you point your finger away from your own chest, every time you project blame, you're letting yourself down. Why? Because we only grow when we take accountability. And yeah, accountability can be painful, uncomfortable. But in that discomfort exists the only bridge to a better tomorrow. That's it. Right? You go to the gym, you put your muscles through stress, you break them down so that they can be built back up stronger. Personal responsibility cannot be the muscle we refuse to build. There's too much at stake. It can't be the thing you avoid. Why? Because it's what injects meaning into our lives. I'll never forget in the 8th grade, and I bet every single person in that class still to this day remembers, my teacher, Mr. Betancourt, walking up to the front of the classroom. He had his hands in a bowl shape and was holding it up to the ceiling, explaining to us that you can't go through life asking the world to give you its scraps. That if you sit and you wait and you hope and you blame, you will lose. That's the recipe for bitterness and resentment. Think of it like a fork in the road, right, where our two options are vastly different. You go left at the fork, and you enter a world of escapism, refusing to confront your problems, finding reasons you can't do that which you know you need to do, hating others, those who have built, grown, or created themselves. Or you go right at the fork. You learn to do the hard thing, to humble yourself, to take control of your life and your world. When things aren't the way you want them to be, you look around and you immediately ask, things outside of my control may have brought me here, but what can I do to fix it? Those of you who have been listening to me for a while, you probably know my favorite articulation of this idea was explained by Will Smith. Basically, he said, look, you can't control where you start. And how true that is, right? Life's not fair. Some people are born into more resources and opportunity. Some people find themselves in social situations that aren't ideal, and that list can go on and on and on, right? Human beings are all different, so there will always be discrepancy. But, and this is Will Smith's point, where you go from here will always be your responsibility. What happens next is all you. You choose whether to complain, shake your fist at the sky, and blame the world around you, or pick the pieces up and move forward. And like I said a minute ago, don't be fooled by the temptation to latch on to that fleeting moment of relief, of running from accountability. The only way to win in the long run is to face your demons. It's that whole saying, when you're riding shotgun, you can dispute the route all you want, but ultimately, it's the driver who's in control. When will you take the wheel in your own life? And sure, the stakes become higher, right? Now it's on you. Now you can get lost. Now you're responsible for the maintenance. Now, if you don't end up at the right place, or I don't know, you're late to a destination, it's your fault. But now, you can also be the one overseeing the journey. Now it's yours, and that's power. And as our world becomes more and more one of escapism, it's becoming more prevalent, easier to avoid or not fix something but tweet about it. How easy it is to not confront our problems but rather open Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and mindlessly scroll. How easy it is to leave that message unread and go about our lives, because that's easier than saying what needs to be said. Strength is being the one amidst all this escapism and avoidance to confront what must be confronted. Whether it's an interaction with someone else or that hard conversation with yourself, a personal change that must take place. Life is such a gift, it's such an opportunity. But we have to move through it with our eyes open. We have to see things that matter and gravitate towards truths that will shape us. Like Mr. B said over 20 years ago now, we can't ever fall into the mentality of holding our hands up to the sky and asking life to give us anything. We can't only point at ourselves when things go the way we want them to go. No, let's be about accountability, empowerment, understanding that if I don't like what's around me, the transformation starts now, and it starts with me. I wasn't perfect, I never will be, but I can learn, I can evolve, and most importantly, I have everything I need to make that happen. It's all awareness. Right? The victimhood idea is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I know that may seem harsh, maybe even lacking empathy. But dropping that narrative was truly the best thing I've done in my life, and I know countless others who would say the same. You can't be both a perpetual victim and be in control. No, life is tough. It knocks us down, and at times it brings us to our knees. But this is a reminder that you cannot stay there. It's a reminder that those who contributed to the situation are now minor detail and background noise. It's a reminder that the path forward is about you. It's about you pushing all that aside and asking yourself, what's required to move in the direction that I most want to go? Because you are that powerful. You are strong enough to make that move. And there will be a point where you look around you and the circumstances have changed, the people are different, the environment is different, you're different. And you'll smile at yourself knowing it's not because of what the world provided. It's not because of what anyone gave you. It's not because of what people out there did or didn't do. No, it's because when you were at your lowest, when life was presenting curveball after curveball, when you looked around and maybe even thought to yourself, there's no way forward here, you found a way to get up and create something new. There's a very specific place I encounter almost every day, where the sidewalk ends, a crossroads exists, and anyone who approaches it is presented with a handful of options. As time's gone on, I've formed quite the relationship with this spot. You're probably wondering why. Who cares? Don't you have better things to think about than the end of a concrete slab? Well, let me ask you something. At its core, how do you define success? What is getting what you want? What does that take? Because if someone asked me, I wouldn't have to say a word. I could point to that random, arbitrary intersection and let it do all the talking for me. So let me explain. For those who know nothing about me, I am an avid runner. And almost daily, I put my running shoes on, I hit the pavement, most of the time long distances, sometimes middle distance. And it's a sacred time for me to push myself, to test my will, ultimately to see if I can be better today than I was yesterday. And every time I approach the end of my workout, I inevitably arrive at this spot, which is about a mile from my doorstep. And it forces me to ask a serious question. How bad do you want to win? My situation is simple. I can continue going straight. I can stay on the paved road where eventually another path forms and leads me to my doorstep. Or I can go left, I can jump onto the beach and finish that last mile off on the sand. Certainly not a life or death decision. Both paths lead me home. But I'll tell you something, when you're tired, when you're thirsty, when you've been running in the South Florida sun in August, running in the soft sand sucks, and it sucks just enough that you question every step. And I remember the first time I opted for the beach, right? Didn't think too much of it, but very quickly that changed. As every step sunk into the sand, as the sun glared down at me, I immediately began looking for a cop-out. Every thought revolved around the idea that I could stop, that this was stupid, it was unnecessary discomfort. Why the hell didn't I just stay on the sidewalk? But as you can imagine, time passed and I arrived home. The next time presented with the same situation, I went left and I felt the same way. But having done it before seemed to ease my mind. I put up with the physical obstacles, the mental gymnastics, and I got home. And then there was a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time, and then it became part of my routine. And a few weeks in, I realized that my thinking was completely different. And this is the important part, okay? See, now, at this point, there were no negative thoughts. There was no self-loathing. My brain wasn't creating a sob story or attempting to highlight the impracticality of my decision. No, it was just routine. It was just what happens when you approach the end of your run. It doesn't matter how far you've gone, how hard you've pushed, how tired you are. You go left. You run on the beach. That's it, period. And it's a funny thing, when you've convinced yourself there are no other options, it becomes incredibly easy to adapt. You may understand where I'm going with this little story, because the moral isn't about running or the beach or Florida summers. It's about laughing in the face of those little inconveniences life throws at you. Doing the small things that make you better, putting yourself through the struggle in the short term for the win in the long term, training your mind to become stronger. Because I'll tell you, when it's hot, when you're tired, it becomes incredibly difficult to think about the macro. Our mind focuses on the small things, the now. Why put yourself through unnecessary hell? But what we learn when we do this is that not only do we become accustomed to anything, but we want the next thing. The reward becomes bigger than the temporary struggle. It's a mutual exchange, sweat for progress, pain for momentum, for a win. Humans are incredible in what they can achieve, how they can adapt to problems and rise above any set of circumstances. And this means when you come to your crossroads, maybe it's not physical. Maybe it's completely mental. Maybe it's a decision that you're scared to make, an obstacle you've been avoiding. It means you stop taking the easy road and you run right through it. You collect your bruises and scars and come out better for it, because those small decisions matter. The meaningless runs in the sand become very meaningful. They're the roots that grow into your subconscious mind that encourage risks, that whisper in your ear that you're better, that you're worthy of more. And if you can't train your mind to fight the small battles, the big victories will forever remain a myth. Reserved for the people you see on TV, the biographies you read on the weekends, and that's not you. You're not average, so stop thinking like you are. Evolve. Start stacking your pain, your discomfort, the little inconveniences you avoid. Stack them like bricks. Because in time, you'll have something very real to stand on. Some build, others tear down. Some take risks, others critique the risk takers. Some pursue the infinite, others settle for a life of limitation. Some make change, others complain that things are no longer the same. Some help people grow, others think that your loss is their gain. Some learn from misfortune, others become held down by it. Some turn fear into opportunity, others avoid the unknown. Some never stop learning, others think they have all the answers. Some do, others talk. Some give, others take. Some live, others wish. Some see an opportunity, others see an obligation. Some work toward the possibility of excellence, others run from the possibility of defeat. Some fall and get back up, others stay where they are so that they never have to worry about leaving their feet. Some embrace the elements, others take shelter. Some search, seek and discover, others wait to be told. Some perform, others watch. Some persist, others stop. Some make the most of every single day. And others watch those very same days go by. So which one are you? What will you create with the pieces presented to you? Not tomorrow or the next day, but right now and every second moving forward. Will you build or tear down, take the easy road or the road less traveled? When all is said and done and you've come to the end of your story, what will it say? Sometimes the most important things we do in our lives are the product of sheer will. Of taking little nothings that surround us and making something out of them. In other words, the greatest opportunities, often the ones we need most, they simply aren't obvious. They're hidden. Hidden behind what looks like difficulty, what appears to be hopelessness. The reason I place so much value on a single step forward when we're overwhelmed or at a low point is because a single step means you're in the game. You're giving yourself a chance to find and obtain those little hidden away pieces that can't be found when we stand still and dwell on a situation. Mobility is empowerment. And when we move forward only with what we have, we're continuously reminded that what we have is enough. We have the tools, the resources, and the ability. We just have to somehow remind ourselves that with those tools, we are capable of building, of creating the incredible. So, quick story about what I believe is the best song ever written. Certainly one of them. And it's a little bit older now, but in 1998, a band called the Goo Goo Dolls released a song called Iris. And that song changed my life. It was the first album I bought. It introduced me to music. I listened to it, probably thousands of times. And even 24 years later, it gives me chills listening to it. And so I wanted to find out a little more about the song. And I came across an interview from Johnny Resnick, who is the frontman and songwriter for the band. And in this interview, the interviewer is asking Johnny about the song. Basic questions, how it came out, how he wrote it, and stuff like that. And there's a few points that I think are amazing. I want to share them with you. First is the state he was in prior to writing the song. He just came out of a divorce, personal life sort of in shambles, coming off of a bad record deal where the label from his previous album had done what record labels are notorious for, and ended up keeping the vast majority of the revenue. He had writer's block, just felt down, and had left his home to stay at a hotel in Los Angeles. Right? Bottom line is, it's not a dream scenario by any stretch of the imagination. And then gets a call from his manager about potentially writing a song for the City of Angels soundtrack. And he says he went and sort of auditioned with what he had, which was 2 lines of a song and a guitar with 2 broken strings. It was evidently good enough. He gets a nod from the label and starts writing. And the verses, according to Johnny in the interview, they align perfectly with the movie, right? It's an angel willing to give up anything, even his immortality, to be human so he could be with this girl, right? And it's this deep dive into, what it is to love someone so much that you give up everything for them. And this is the icing on the cake for me, that's when I realized that I wanted to write about this. The interviewer says essentially, okay, Johnny, the verses align with the movie, but the chorus, this revolutionary, big, beautiful, powerful chorus, it seems to take a left turn. Can you explain that to us? What were you thinking? And he just kind of pauses blankly for a second. And I'm thinking, no, don't you dare say what I know you're about to say. And sure enough, he does. He basically shrugs and goes, I don't know, the words just kind of worked. And, I'm paraphrasing, that's not a direct quote, but that's the idea. One of the deepest, most powerful, beautiful songs I've ever heard is Patchwork, right? Even the song title, he says, was named after a country singer on the cover of a magazine laying next to him, Iris. That's patchwork. It's pieces put together, right? And then as I thought about it for a minute, it's of course it is. How perfect, how absolutely perfect. The whole thing is an assembly and construction, a metaphor for the human spirit. Conceived when its author was down and out, right? Taking L after L, called to present an idea, didn't have some crazy budget or equipment to pitch this song. Nope. Moved forward only with what he had in the moment. And that was enough. Then the song, a beautiful depiction of, the movie's theme, combined with elements of real life, his personal situation, what he goes through, maybe even components that mean nothing other than an ability to encapsulate a feeling or an emotion. Words that allowed him to put a bow on all these little pieces himself and get it out the door. And millions of people listened to that song and were changed by it. Not because of what it meant to Johnny, but because it gave them a chance to take it and fit their own worlds and struggles into those same lines. It became a vehicle to inspire others to push forward, to find things in themselves they didn't know were there. This has become one of my favorite metaphors for finding the hero buried deep within yourself. Changing your life, changing your world, changing the world around you, the lives of others, can truly be, and in fact often is, the result of just moving forward with what you have, right? Realizing that even when the mountain seems too tall to climb, there is a way. We just require that mental shift. Listen to this question, right? Because I used to ask myself all the time, is this possible? Can this be done? Well, then that becomes the question that I focused on. And everything that occurred around me became evidence that would either support or invalidate that possibility. The second I came up against an inevitable barrier, I'd think, maybe this is telling me the answer is no. Right? Life will always be evidence for or against the questions that you choose to ask, which is why it's so important that you're asking the right questions. Because the second you change that question to, look, I know this can be done, but how will I do it? You start looking at life as a puzzle that must be solved. That same obstacle that was once interpreted as a stop sign is now merely an indicator that the path exists, just perhaps somewhere else. You've extended the pursuit. You've given yourself permission to keep looking. And it's because of these self-created expeditions that we find more in ourselves. You know, things won't always go perfectly, but when you look at those imperfections through the right lens, you see that this isn't about you. It's about that particular door being locked. All you have to do is believe in yourself enough to move to the next one, to continue knocking until you find a door that opens, until you find that bridge to whatever comes next. And that's why I love that story about Iris, why I wanted to share it today. It's crafted during times far from ideal, with resources far from abundant, with words far from perfect or related or self-explanatory. But you end up on the other side with this masterpiece. This song that certainly changed my life and definitely impacted many others. And it's like we have to realize when we're sitting on the edge of the bed, you know, maybe it's not divorce or writer's block, but whatever it is holding you back, that's not the end. It's your reason to keep going, to begin again. You don't have to know how things will be, but you do have to know how they won't be. They won't be like this because you won't let them stay this way. And maybe it's not 2 written lines and a broken guitar. Maybe it's moving forward when your strength is not at a 10 out of 10. When you don't really have that spark. Or you're longing for some resources, some finances, wondering where they'll come from. But pushing forward one little step at a time until things start making sense. And maybe it's not a combining and restructuring of song lyrics, using your personal experiences to fill the gaps on the paper before you. But it's trusting that your own story will ultimately tell itself if you don't put the pen down. That the heroes will rise, the villains will fall, and the adventure will continue on. After all, that's what life is. One giant adventure, testing us, pushing us, and transforming us when we're at our lows, while reminding us during the good times why we're lucky to have been gifted that same adversity we once looked at with contempt. Why we're lucky that when everything's made to be broken, as the lyrics suggest, we get to make something imperfectly beautiful with the pieces. What's the difference between simple and easy? Well, simple is straightforward, uncomplicated. Easy, on the other hand, means achieved without great effort. The difference between those two words is subtle, but essential to understand. One deals with the complexity of an outcome. The other, your will and determination to achieve that outcome. Becoming who you most want to be is simple. But becoming who you most want to be is not easy. Just like walking is simple, yet hiking up a mountain is not easy. The procedure didn't change, the context did. So let's talk about context. Let's talk about this cyclical nature of growth, because it's not that most people can't. It's that most people won't. It's not that most people don't get how. It's that they don't have a strong enough why. The path is laid out before you. You just have to be willing to walk down it. Will you? Step 1, realize there's more out there. It's not that what you're doing now isn't amazing. It's just that yesterday's act of courage is now today's status quo. What was the spectacular is now the mundane. What was once the ceiling you had to jump to touch is now the floor you walk on. So at the very least, it prompts you to ask, well, what's next? Simple. Not easy. Step 2, the acquisition of courage. Yesterday's courage was a fight. It took a lot out of you, and it's ultimately what got you here. But it dropped you at the curb, it waved goodbye and went on its merry way, and here you are. You can stay here. A lot of people do. You can reminisce of the glory days, the old path, yesterday's triumphs. Or you can do that perpetually uncomfortable exercise of vulnerability. Stepping into tomorrow's unknown, reminding yourself that life's greatest rewards have a hefty price tag, and that price is discomfort. But I've already played this game, one might think. No, what you did was learn the rules. Now it's time to apply them to a new setting, and around goes the merry-go-round. It might seem like a replication from the horizontal, but here's the secret. You can't see the vertical. You have yet to look down and see your ascent, see what you're becoming. Just by staying on, holding tight, just by believing in yourself enough to begin again, you are fanning those tiny flames of courage in your soul that wait to be spread like a wildfire. Simple, but not easy. Step 3, mistakes. Now, of course, it's not the mistakes themselves you fear. It's what you think those mistakes will mean. Ridicule, embarrassment, lack of direction or identity, losing what you have. But here's the catch. When you realize the upside is greater than the downside, you liberate yourself. When you realize there's more to gain than to lose, your potential for greatness is born. How does one act on this? Mistakes. By making mistakes. By injecting yourself into the turbulence of progress. Our biology has not yet learned that the uncomfortable thing is the right thing, and that's why you get resistance. That's why it hurts. And it's why few people will accomplish what you will. When it comes to your climb, every day is opposite day. When they run out, you're running in. When they play safe, you play for the victory. To become who you might be, you must learn how to get there. Mistakes are your curriculum. Simple, but not easy. Step 4, trust yourself. Okay, sure, no problem, easy. Well, yeah, it's easy when you're getting what you want. But evolution takes time, and there's nothing quite like giving and giving and giving and not getting. There's nothing quite like stepping up to the plate again and again and again and bringing no runners home. So how does one find the strength to continue walking up to the batter's box? Well, growth is exponential, and those swings and misses matter. The infield singles matter. Everything matters. Because it's all chiseling your future self out of stone. Nothing is dependent on the next at-bat as much as all at-bats in the aggregate. That's why success is so often considered to be sheer will, dependent not on the home run, but on the discipline, the self-belief to keep walking up to the plate. Repetition and adjustment. Repetition and adjustment. Repeat and refine, repeat, refine. Those are the materials from which all things are made. Simple, but not easy. And then we have the finale, the ending, step 5. Celebrate and adjust. At some point, you'll be able to look over your shoulder and notice something that perhaps you hadn't before. Space. Space between where you are and where you started. It's not sudden, but gradual. And undoubtedly, with enough persistence, it will emerge. These moments, they are precious. They are times to acknowledge what you've accomplished, the sacrifices you have made. They are life's way of reminding you what you are building and who you are becoming. It's a time of celebration. Every little win means something. Every small victory matters, so relish in it. And then transform it. Normalize it. Recognize that mountaintop is your foundation now. Your starting point has changed, and so have you, which means so have your expectations. With an increase in ability comes an upgrade to what's possible, what's expected, and look at that. We have arrived at a new step 1. Realize there is more. This is the process for capturing that which life has to offer. If you can fall in love with that, appreciate it, respect it, while simultaneously understanding it's not scary, it's dependent entirely on your ability to push forward. If you can understand that, there is nothing you can't do. Nowhere you can't go. Simple, yes. Easy, no. But you're not in this for easy. You're in it for the journey, the growth, the adventure. You're in it because it's not easy. You'll see in time, as will the world, that this decision to endure was simply the best one you ever made. It was an ordinary day. Those, more often than not, are the ones worth commenting on, for it's in the ordinary that so much is decided. So I got out of bed a little later than usual. That extra spring in my step has been elusive lately. You know, sometimes we go through those periods where it just becomes challenging to get excited about everyday things. We forget why we're on the path we're on. Or as the distinction goes, the fleeting passion has dissipated. And what we're left with, hopefully, is purpose. Purpose is what pulls us through the low points. Purpose is what we latch on to when things aren't exciting or we've fallen down. We look up and say, that's the reason I'm here. That's the reason I will endure. And when we lose that, we're due for a rediscovery of some sort. Finding it again becomes of the utmost importance. If you think of one single star alone in the night sky, sure, it's beautiful in its own right. But it also feels like it's missing part of what makes it so spectacular. The collective. Just like one small step forward or one win or overcoming one obstacle, getting through one day, is great. But it doesn't become magnificent until you look at it in the context of the whole, the bigger picture. And if you can't see the bigger picture, you lose the power of all those little pieces that bring it to life. Meaning brings magic to the mundane. Sometimes I like to think of a character collecting those stars, putting them into a bag he's carrying over his shoulder, picking them up and dropping them in one by one, moving around the night, and collecting those little glowing stories that will ultimately come to mean everything. Eventually, he turns his bag upside down and the stars fall out. And you get this jaw-dropping, spiraling sea of light in the Milky Way. You remember now, right, why each little star mattered. You think back and go, that makes sense. Difficult to see in the moment. And I think it's this recollection during the trivialities of life that is the hardest thing. It's not that the world is collapsing around us. No, that would actually give us something tangible to address. It's that the stars sometimes are few and far between. The night feels more prominent than the sea of light that will someday materialize. The hardest thing is not right now. I wrote down recently a list of all the things that were bothering me, right? The things that I wanted to address. I made a list on the left side of the page, and then to the right of each item, I made a little box, a space to write essentially what I'm doing about it. So for example, if injury is on the list, well, on the box to the right, I'd put physical therapy, right? To show myself I'm making progress. Or if something business related is on the list, on the corresponding box to the right, I'd put maybe hired a business coach or creating new services, etc. And they don't need to be solutions per se. In fact, most won't, but they show me that I'm at least not accepting the areas in my life that I find insufficient. These are tangible obstacles, and they, with direction and persistence, can be overcome. That's saying an elephant is eaten one bite at a time. And this notebook, it made me feel better, right? Like, this is mine. I get to control how I feel and what I do about it. But again, this is relieving a symptom, not the root cause, because the true elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, is finding a way to hold on to the meaning that this list represents. It's believing that all these things pave a way to something powerful, and that is the hardest thing, holding on to purpose as it elevates like some kind of hot air balloon drifting towards the horizon. And I'm not letting go of that basket. An endeavor that requires faith. And faith is a word that means many things to many different people, as it should. But the bottom line is, it requires you believe what you're doing right now will make tomorrow better than today. If you don't believe you're worthy of a masterpiece, if you don't believe to live is the most incredible of gifts and your job is to arrange the pieces that reiterate that in a way that's significant to you, then you have to remind yourself what those stars become when the bag is tipped upside down. You have to remember the subtlety of the journey. And I think that's what I forgot. It had been too long since I stepped outside of the mundane, since I saw a sunrise or sunset, since I looked at the divinity of a universe so much bigger than me. A container for my little steps, my victories and my obstacles. That list of problems and solutions, it was helpful in the moment. What I needed at the time, it provided clarity. But ultimately, it was one plank or board in the house being built. See, when the trivial things become the only things, we need to remind ourselves we probably aren't looking at the right things. And maintaining that perspective can be the hardest thing. But if we can find it within ourselves, and remember that we'll have losses and we'll have wins and we'll have days where we're unsure and confused and doubtful and days where we're certain and positive things are going the way we want them to go. It all comes together to be bigger than the sum of its parts. It means something more. And when we look back down the road, we'll see that everything brought us where we needed to be, that it all mattered, and that trusting ourselves, having faith in the process, was the answer. So when it happens again, and it will, my solution is going to be simple. Both appreciate the mundane and seek out the spectacular. A song or beautiful scenery or good times with the ones I love. Something to remind me that the things that often trip me up or throw me for a loop are stepping stones. It's possible that, my bag full of stars isn't ready to be turned upside down. Maybe there's still a lot of collecting to do, work to be done. But its evidence is all around us in the magnificence of the outside world, the opportunity awaiting our eyes opening every morning. We don't have to do anything, but we get to do whatever sets our souls on fire, and that is the incredible distinction. So here's to letting the hardest thing light our path. One step, one day at a time. There's a quote by William James. He says, "Most people never run far enough on their first wind to find out they've got a second. Give your dreams all you've got, and you'll be amazed at the energy that comes out of you." Now, that's one of these ideas that in practice is a lot different than to understand. It's like suffering is tough, but you need to suffer. Okay, check. Then you go out into the real world, and it feels like the walls are collapsing around you, and it's very easy to retreat from that understanding, right? To do what instincts tell you to do, emotions tell you to do, versus what's best for you in the long term, right? Because it's tough to get past the emotive state and understand that there's more on the other side. I think that's a very important and substantial part of life. And one of the reasons running has been such an important part of my life, one of the reasons a lot of the people that watch this run, is because there's a lot of difficulty associated with it. That if you can hang in there long enough and you can get past that, there's a bliss and a joy that you couldn't have otherwise gotten. It's not obtainable without immersing yourself, in the treacherous landscape first. That's the ticket, the cost of admission. And it would remind me daily. It would be sort of a parallel to everything else in my life, right? It's like, just like in running, ... Because it was like a microcosm of real life. It's a discomfort that lasts 30 minutes as opposed to the 5 years of getting a business off the ground, right? But you can look to that because it's smaller and it's easier to comprehend, and you go, yes, that's the map, right? And for me, it was running. For other people, it was other things, and it doesn't need to be running. But I think it's important to have that thing, right, that you can sort of look at and go, that's the way the world works, remember? So when I'm struggling, it doesn't mean it's over, quite the contrary. It means I'm doing the right thing. It means I'm looking for, I'm subjecting myself to, life's difficulty in pursuit of something meaningful. And so the other day, I had this epiphany, this realization. I had this reminder that I hadn't had in so long. And, it's been months and months and months. I've been battling injuries with my right knee, my left ankle, and just really struggling. I went on a run for the first time in a long time. And it didn't take long to just feel feel absolutely terrible, right? I did not feel, it wasn't a great feeling. Like the second things got difficult and, things sort of tensed up and I got cramps and things that hadn't been working in a long time, I was asking them to work and my body was just screaming no. And the first thing that comes to mind is, dude, you've maxed out. Like, stop. Like, this is a bad idea. Red flag. Over and over and over again. Stop sign. Wrong way. Don't go. But like I said, I'd already made the decision. I'm like, I put my shoes on. I'm out here. Whatever happens, happens. In life, you are your own experiment. As Charlie Munger has said, let's see how this goes. Keep moving. And what I found, what I rediscovered, was that second wind. Where, and everyone who runs understands this, when you feel like absolute trash, but you push through it, particularly when you're running a long distance, you ultimately find this period of bliss down the road. Not just like pain-free or like, it's not just like you're ignoring it or repressing it. Like when you're running a long distance and you hang in there long enough, you find this stretch where you feel good. You feel light on your feet. You have energy. You just feel incredible. And it doesn't come without enduring the difficult pieces. It's one of the things I love about running long distance. It's like up, down, and you learn to cope. I mean, not every time, right? Sometimes you run, it feels amazing. Sometimes the entire thing feels difficult. But the idea of saying, hey, I'm going to go through this no matter what, and what you find on the other side, more often than not, is a feeling of contentment. You find, the best running that you can have. And you don't get that without the difficulty. And that, to me, it was like, wow, I needed that. I needed to understand that again. I needed to see that, to feel that. Because when life gets difficult, you don't have that reminder. You don't have something to look to say, this is how it's supposed to be. Our instinct says stop. Our instinct says when things don't go well, somewhere along the way, you screwed up. You made the wrong decision. We don't say, hey, this is par for the course. And so often, it is. So often we have to say, look, you signed the dotted line. Now remember, it's not going to be an easy journey. There's going to be times where you want to stop. And you can, or you can push through and obtain that second win. The good stuff. So much of life hides behind discomfort. So remember that. Right? It doesn't matter if you're running, or you're an athlete, or you're a teacher, or you're a parent, or you're a student, or you're an entrepreneur, you're in the corporate world, you're working for a nonprofit. Like, it doesn't matter. Context can be removed. The reality is we want things, we have goals, we have aspirations. Part of what makes life meaningful is moving towards the fulfillment of our potential, maximizing the opportunity at hand. And that will bring in obstacles. And we will have to ask ourselves the question, is it worth it? And I want you to understand when you are at that metaphorical fork in the road that it is. And the best part lives behind that fork, lives behind the discomfort again and again and again and again. That won't change. Sometimes we need someone to remind us that. Because intuition, doesn't say, all right, walk right into this chaos, walk right into this storm. No, we play defensive. We retreat. We want to take the safe road. Makes sense. But in the big picture, it's counterproductive. We're hurting ourselves. Right? Again, ticket of admission means you say yes when most people would say no. Most people would say no because no is the obvious thing. When it hurts, you stop. When you're tired, you stop. When you're confused or lost or unsure or scared, stop. But stopping means you're done, right? The only way to stop in life, the only way to lose in life, is to decide that you're not going forward. The world can throw anything it wants at you, right? I'm personifying the universe here, but life can throw obstacles and setbacks, and it can make things difficult. It can make things crazy. As long as you keep saying, okay, and stepping into it, you haven't lost. You can only lose when you decide you have. You can only lose when you decide I'm not moving forward anymore. It's a beautiful thing. It's how powerful you are. It's how powerful we all are. We don't realize it. We think outside context dictate what happens to us. It's like in a way, they paint the picture, but you decide if it's where you're going to be or not. You decide what to do with those pieces, what to build with those pieces or not build with those pieces. And remember that, right? That's why I needed that run so badly. I needed to remember that when things become difficult, if you push through them, you get that bliss. You get that sense of satisfaction. You get what you were looking for. You have to say yes. You have to be willing to make that decision. So, to my runners, keep running. To my artists, keep painting, keep making music, keep writing, right? To my entrepreneurs, keep building, keep growing. Everybody, keep growing. The world cannot tell you what to do. It can give you pieces. It can give you context. You are the author of your story. So here's to us having the courage to write the best next chapter we possibly can.